104.7 The Cave. KKLH, Marshfield, Springfield. A proud member of the Kansas City Chiefs radio network.
Touchdown, Kansas City!
Now, it's time for Ned Talk.
Usually we start out the day and we talk about how beautiful the weather is. A beautiful day to be doing whatever. Well, it's not a beautiful day, so it's a great day to be on the radio talking about sports, right? Right, Ned?
Just to be rhetorical about it, any day is a beautiful day when you can talk about football and the sports world. Weather-wise,
Joe Westen, Ned Reynolds, Josh Roberts, and Kevin. Kevin, how are you? You're in snowy Denver. I guess we shouldn't complain too much, should we?
Good afternoon, guys. Thanks for having me. Yes, we probably got in the city 5 or 6 inches. Kind of dying off a little bit, but it's cold. There's snow. So.
Hey, Kevin, last time, you correct me if I'm wrong, but last time that we talked to you, weren't you in Hawaii or someplace on some exotic beach somewhere?
That is correct. Thanks for reminding me that I'm not there right now. I'm going to have to shovel the walk as soon as we're done.
Oh, you've got kids that can do that, right?
That's true. Good point.
It's good. It's good for them. It builds character.
It builds character.
It builds character to get out and shovel the snow. So let's
a little better on my back too.
Kevin joins us whenever we have the Chiefs Broncos game. We didn't have Kevin on a couple of weeks ago, but we decided we were going to have him back this week, and we were to talk about it because we always like to get that feel for what's going on in another market, especially an AFC West market. And season's not gone as planned, Kevin. How are people in Denver feeling about what's going on with the Broncos right now?
So I think there's a little bit of patience given all the turnover with ownership and coaching staff and even the roster, right? Peyton came in and he's cleaning house a little bit. He's bringing on a bunch of old New Orleans guys and getting rid of some other guys. And, we lost a couple games we should have won, which seems to be a theme around here. And so while we're impatient with this franchise and we're used to winning, we kind of thought – I thought if we were being optimistic, we might go 500. I know you can't do that anymore with the 17-game season, but you get it. And all of a sudden, here we find ourselves. So I think we understand the season's pretty much over, and I think the trade deadline will tell us a lot about what they think over there at headquarters.
There was such a great amount of publicity surrounding the acquisition of Russell Wilson. What's been the reaction from the public? Has it, in fact, dwindled quite a bit?
So it's interesting you ask that, Ed, because I think last year people were kind of done with him, right? But I think we also realized the coaching staff wasn't doing him any favors. He was kind of running for his life. We lost a bunch of really good offensive players to injury, which, of course, we're doing again this year. This year, I think the sentiment would be he is not the problem. He's not the problem, but he's not the solution. So then you land in no man's land, and that's a tricky place to be when you have, whatever, $150 million left on the deal. And you might have a really high draft pick. What do you do? So I'd rather be really bad or really good. No man's land to me is the worst place to be.
Oh, I agree.
It's kind of been strange to watch this whole thing play out from a distance because Russell Wilson had such a good reputation. And then at the end of his time in Seattle, he starts to be the villain. And then when he comes over to Denver, that seems to come with him. How's that play out in Denver?
Yeah, so one of the things Peyton shut down pretty quickly when he got here was that Russ is not the king. You know, he had like his own office, and he was always in front of the camera, and everything was 1,000% positive. And when you're losing, that gets real old, that message. It's like, dude, come on, you can say we had a bad game. You can say I wasn't good today. You can say this team's not in a good place, but it was always like, I believe in us. I believe. And it got kind of old, right?
Yeah.
And he kind of shut all that down, and he was like, guys, we're just going to work and kind of keep your mouth shut and let's grind this out. And I do think that's kind of helped people's perception of him, is that he's not just the celebrity with a celebrity wife always on camera. People people will tell you he's a really hard worker. But again, when you're 2-5, it doesn't matter.
I think you made a very cogent statement about the problem not being him. The problem is defense. This is the last place team in the NFL on defense. I think they're 32nd against the pass and 30th against the rush, or maybe vice versa, but whatever. That's the correction that needs to be made with the trade deadline coming up. Do you see perhaps a state of flux with the Denver lineup?
Yeah, and then before I answer that, that was the surprise, I think, this year, is that last year, even though we couldn't score a point, I think we averaged 16, 17 points. If we would have averaged 20 or 21, we would have been a playoff team. That's how razor thin that was. Mm-hmm. So we thought we could still lean on our defense. And then you go to Miami and give up 70, and we're like, what just happened? Now we have a new defensive coordinator who's a former head coach, Vance Joseph. And so that's kind of been a head-scratcher for us. Then we just released Gregory and Clark, which was kind of surprising. And so here we are, like the one strength we thought we had is now our weakness, and we're actually scoring more but giving up more. I think the trade deadline, man, that'll tell us a lot. The rumors are Jerry Jeudy, who's a first-round pick, who's never totally panned out, shows flashes. Our tight ends always get hurt, even though we seem to draft two of them every single year. Garrett Bowles, left tackle, he's been pretty solid. He's all pro. But when you start talking about contracts, everyone's going to be coming after Patrick Tan. He's still on a rookie deal. He's probably the best player on the team. He's beloved here. And if they decide to move on from him, it might get ugly.
Jerry Jeudy's name's been mentioned several times in trade talk headed towards this deadline, and he's been tagged with the Chiefs. Can you see them actually making a deal within the conference, with making a deal within the division even?
I can't see that. You know, say all you want about Peyton, but he's still pretty old school when it comes to, you know, stuff like that. Trading in your division, you know, he's closed practices. He's a little kind of has that old school, like kind of Parcells, paranoia stuff. And I think just from a PR perspective, it wouldn't make sense and it wouldn't be worth it. So I can't see that, man. I don't even know what case you could offer other than picks, but I sure hope that's not the case.
You're listening to Ned Talk, your local live sports talk show brought to you by The Dive. I'm Patton, Ned Reynolds, Joe Westen, Josh Roberts. Kevin is with us today from Denver, from snowy Denver, Colorado, and we're talking sports. Ned's got a question for you, Kevin.
Yeah, I want to know a little bit about Frank Clark. The Broncos jettison him. That's in and of itself not a tremendous surprise. Doesn't sign with the Chiefs, which was to me a huge surprise. Does go to the Seattle Seahawks. My question to you is this. The defense being as bad as it is, was Clark among those who was as bad as we think he was?
So I remember you telling me that you kind of liked him, and I kind of liked it when we got him. I think there's more to it, Ned, that we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But then the more stories came out, it wasn't like he was a bad guy or anything. It was, they said he barely actually made the active squad coming out of training camp. So
Really?
I think he wasn't well thought of to begin with this new regime, right? And so no one on the inside the rooms were surprised he was gone, but those of us on the outside, I was kind of surprised. It's like maybe kind of a cap hit you just wanted to get rid of, or maybe you're just like, I mean, we're not getting to the quarterback, and I'm sure we won't today either. But I was surprised, Ned, yeah, for sure.
Well, interestingly enough, the Chiefs get McCole Hardman back, and he hadn't cut the mustard with the New York Jets. And I was just flabbergasted that he didn't, especially when the Chiefs gave him a physical, for heaven's sake, and he still signs with another team. I agree with you, Kevin. There's something that's amiss here, and something we don't know about.
See, the big joke around here was that the Broncos signed him solely to get a hold of the Chiefs playbook so that they would know what the Chiefs are going. And then that got fueled when right before the first Broncos-Chiefs game, there was all the talk of him being cut on the day following the game, and that's what eventually played out. Yeah. So it was a little unusual the way all that worked out.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of teams doing that, but typically you would be doing that with maybe, you know, the 55th guy on the roster or a special teams guy, right? You don't do that with a guy who's making that kind of money, who's been a starter in the league. I wouldn't think. And even if that was the case, well, how'd that work out?
Yeah.
Good point. Very good point.
So a couple of things work.
16 in a row.
A couple of things working out for Denver today, and I want to get your feeling about the game today and what you think the Broncos need to do to turn this thing around against the Chiefs. A couple of things going in their favor. The weather's bad there. They've had to dig out the stadium. I've seen pictures of what's happening there in Denver, so the weather works well in that sense. That kind of hampers Patrick Mahomes and the passing game. And the other thing is Patrick Mahomes apparently does have the flu. So what does Denver have to do to get a win today?
I think the most important thing, of course, is to slow them down, right? And in fact, in the first game a couple of weeks ago, we kind of did that. And I know Casey's offense isn't clicking yet totally. I mean, Mahomes to Kelsey always does. We have the next time we guard Kelsey will be the first time.
Every team feels that way.
So if he's not running around, my hunch is if he plays, he will be running around and doing all the Mahomes things that he always does. I think turnovers. That's our only chance. So if we get maybe a turnover on a punt or a kickoff and we have a short field, I think that's if we beat them 3-1 in turnovers, let's say, and we can run and that kind of ball control, clock control, I think we could keep it close.
You folks out in Denver are very accustomed to cold and, I mean, very fluctuating circumstances, and that is the case now with the extreme early season cold. Do the fans still show up in force, in your opinion?
Today will be a good test to that, Ned, because typically, yes, my entire life, it didn't matter what the weather was. In fact, some people were more invigorated when it was kind of crappy weather, like, hey, this is Denver, welcome a mile high, right?
Right.
But we've seen in the last couple of years, especially last year with Hackett, there was a game that was going to overtime, and the fans were leaving. It was kind of cold, but they're getting kind of fed up. And let's be honest, I deal with it too. When you got the Avalanche and you got the Nuggets, right? You get they might spend their money elsewhere, given the product we've been looking at for the last 5 years.
Don't forget the Rockies.
Yeah. Hey, you want to laugh, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely.
Playoffs more recently than the Broncos. How about that?
That's
Wow.
astounding. Is that right?
Yeah.
I got to tell you a story very, very quickly, Kevin. And some friends of mine were traveling cross country, and they came back and they were laughing. This is a number of years ago. They had stopped in Denver and gotten in a hotel room on a Sunday night, and they're watching the Sunday night news on a day that the Broncos lost, a Sunday that they lost a game that apparently they're supposed to win. And he said, Ned, you go to see it. The whole newscast, you would have thought the world had come to an end. People were, I mean, nobody smiled. It was, oh, my God, the Broncos lost. On and on, half an hour, three-quarter, it was just a soliloquy, all saddened. I don't think that exists now, or does it, in your opinion?
So I would say depending on your age, right? But, yes, that was totally always the case, Ned. And Joe, I was joking about it with my father-in-law. Like, when we were younger, it would ruin my whole week. Like, not only would I be bummed on Sunday, I would be bummed throughout the week, right? Now, of course, back then we didn't have some of these other teams we have. But, Ned, no, I can't say that's the case. I think we've become the most pessimistic I've seen in our lifetime, to where even when we're ahead in the fourth quarter, we just look at each other and say, how are we going to blow this? Yeah. And that's a bad place to be.
Well, Kevin, as a Cubs fan, a longtime Cubs fan, I'd like to say welcome.
Yeah.
Welcome to that side of fandom.
I have a little story to share with you, Kevin, is that we every year we host a Chiefs happy hour before the season starts, and Mitch Holtis, who's the voice for the Kansas City Chiefs, and Danon Hughes, who's his partner, they come down here and they do a little pep rally at a local watering hole. This year they did it down at the Dive on Patton, and one of the things they were talking about before the season started, Mitch Holtis got up there and he said, now look, things are going to be tough this year. Got some new talent in the division. Got Sean Payton over in Denver. Sean Payton, greatest coach ever, greatest NFL coach ever, winningest NFL coach ever. Let me talk about the last time Chiefs played the Saints when Sean Payton was the coach. We beat him. Let's talk about the time before that when the Chiefs played the Saints, Sean Payton coach. We beat them. Let's talk about the time before that. Sean Payton, coach. We beat them. So that was the pep rally. Everybody went crazy because they were down because he was just nailing home. He was going, Sean Payton, greatest coach ever, coming to Denver. Things going to turn around there. How long of a leash?
That's crazy.
How long of a leash does Sean Payton have in Denver with the folks there?
So my guess would be pretty typical, right? 3 years. You give them 3 years. The huge domino is if they move on from Russ. Of course, the Walmart family can afford to do that, but you take a massive hit and then it compromises the rest of your roster. There are some whispers that some players actually want out, that he's a bit of a dictator, and kids these days aren't used to that from their coach. So I would guess 3 years. They're going to give him a little bit of time, and really who's out there. You look at the guy in Miami. We like him. He's actually from Denver. But for the most part, he was the best guy out there. I think we got to give him a little bit of time. It's not like some of these coordinators we kept trying to put in the CEO role and they just weren't cut out for it. I think he is, but he might have to change his tune a little bit too. He can't just keep doing the same thing.
Well, I truly believe that the NFL has changed as far as the coaching strategies that work. And I think that's evident when you have a college coach that goes to the NFL and tries to be the alpha male in that locker room, because it doesn't work in the NFL anymore. I feel like that's what happened with Nick Saban when he tried to go to the Miami Dolphins.
After Urban Meyer.
Yeah, Urban Meyer,
right.
same
Meyer.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you're right in that Peyton is one of those throwbacks. He's a Parcells clone. Comes from that coaching tree, right? And
he does.
So he's more of that disciplinarian, and you're doing it my way or you're out. And I don't think that works in the NFL anymore, because the players are making more than the coaches, and the players are saying, you know what, I've got the ability, I'm going to do my thing, and I'll run your plays, but you don't tell me what to do after.
Josh, I'm going to partially disagree with you. And it's only partial because, nobody, well, I can't say nobody, but some players do react very well to that disciplinary tactic, and others do not. However, keep in mind, this is different from college. This is pros, and they are getting paid to play. They're getting paid to absorb whatever happens to them. So I think maybe from that, I can imagine that Peyton is probably not the nicest person in all the world on the sidelines. He wasn't in New Orleans. After all, he coached the team when they had Bounty Gate.
Yeah.
Greg Williams. Well, hey, Ned, I have to disagree with you there, just minorly. Did you just say college players aren't getting paid?
I was going to bring that up too.
I did. What did I say?
You said that college players aren't getting paid.
They are. They sure are, aren't they?
They are now.
Hey, Kevin.
I beg your forgiveness, guys.
Hang on with us for just a minute. Just hang with us. We're going to go into a commercial break, and I want to talk to you a little bit about Coach Prime and what's going on out there in Colorado with the Buffs. We'll be back in a minute with more Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave.
You're listening to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, part of the Kansas City Chiefs radio network. Back to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, a proud member of the Kansas City Chiefs radio network.
About 35 minutes away from the start of the Chiefs pregame show right here on 104.7 The Cave, the Chiefs and the Broncos. We're talking with Kevin. He is our Denver reporter. Loves to tell us about what's going on there with the Denver Broncos. We've got all that scoop. Now it's time to talk about your favorite subject, Taylor Swift. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
You want to give Ned a heart attack?
I just ejected him from the studio. He's out of here.
You're out of here. All right, let's talk about Coach Prime. How is it? How's the feeling there? What's going on?
So, I would say, he's worth every penny, right? Their season tickets are through the roof. Their viewership's through the roof. The recruits are just keep coming. I would also say I think the glass slippers come off a little bit in the past couple of weeks. Now, early in the season, they've won some games that no one expected them to. Now they've lost a couple that they should have won. They got beat again last night at UCLA. didn't have a chance. They have all the skill position guys, but they don't have anyone in the trenches, and their Coach Prime's poor kid's going to get hurt. He took 24 hits or something like that last night.
Jeez.
And their schedule doesn't get any easier. So I'm not positive they'll even make a bowl game. And I think, the shine's come off a little bit. It's all fun and games when he's on 60 Minutes and every commercial and every radio station and every TV camera you can find when you're 4-1. But when you're 4-4 and you blew a 29-point lead to Stanford, and then UCLA manhandled you, they got to get back to work, and I think they're probably all kind of beat up and banged up. But again, they were 1-11 last year, so
yeah.
It's already a huge, huge improvement. And there's a lot of eyeballs on them and a lot of money coming in. So, great move by Boulder.
He is doing the one thing that the University of Colorado wanted him to do, and that is bring attention back to the university. Now, I doubt very much, in all honesty, Kevin, that he even really actively coaches that team. You see him on the sidelines, and he's got his arm around his sons and all that sort of thing. But the assistant coaches are the ones doing the controlling of that ball club. The defensive coordinator about went nuts last night over something, maybe too many men on the field or whatever. But fact of the matter remains, he is calling attention to Colorado, and that's what they want. And in time, if given a free hand, he'll have some competitive teams. Now, they're going to the Big 12 next year, an altogether different level of competition. They could do pretty well there. It depends on what he is able to do and what philosophy is absorbed by the players.
Has there been?
Yeah, he's got to get some big boys in the middle.
Yeah, that's
one little wrinkle that I don't think people have totally thought about that I've noticed is frustrating him and the staff. You talk about assistant coaches. It's a bunch of who's who of like former head coaches, right? It's a bunch of awesome, experienced guys. So he doesn't have to do much of the coaching, which I think is probably smart. But every game they're playing, it's 10 in the morning or it's going at 10 o'clock at night. And so they've had this really weird travel schedule. And getting up early for all these Fox morning games or playing well into midnight Mountain Time. And so I think getting the Big 12 will kind of get them back in a rhythm. But, in the Big 12, dude, if you don't have those O-line and D-linemen, man, it's going to be a long, long season.
Yeah, you're going to get beat up.
Where do you see Colorado at in 3 years?
I think they will be on the map. I think they'll be decent. And I think Coach Sanders will be somewhere else.
Really?
You know what?
I think once his kids leave, and I think they are going to stick around, again, because of that NIL money. They don't need to go jump to try and get drafted necessarily, and I think they'll stay and play for their dad. And let's just make up a name, but what if Florida State comes calling?
Mm-hmm. Cogent statement on your part. He is not – he has the first D1 head coaching job out there, and he's doing a very good job in bringing attention. However – is it to allure him to stay out there? I don't think so. I agree with you. I think he goes – he's kind of he was a gypsy as a player, and he's a bit – that's his lifestyle. So, yeah, I would agree. I think he does go somewhere else in time, not right away.
Has there been anything about what he has done as a coach that has surprised you, good or bad?
I guess I was surprised at how quickly he could overhaul the roster. I mean, I knew the portal was out there, and I knew how it worked. I didn't think you could actually field a team of 83 new players.
Yeah.
And at least be competitive, right? That could have been a nightmare, and I thought it might have become one. And maybe it's showing its face a little bit now. But I was surprised about that. I didn't think they beat TCU game one, even though TCU's team was different. They were in the national title game. Mm-hmm. And so I was a little surprised about that. I was also a little surprised at how much hype came after that. Like, just you couldn't get away from it. It's sort of like Taylor Swift, close your ears there, Ned. But it's like, dude, okay, can we just take a little bit of break from Prime and, get back to football? And so that kind of surprised me a bit. But the rest of it, I mean, with the staff you put together, not totally surprised, no.
Here's my thought on that. That's what Deion Sanders wants. And Deion Sanders wants to be in the spotlight. Deion Sanders wants his name on everybody's mind. He wants the interviews. He wants the commercials. That's who he is. That's why he is Prime. And so when you look at what he's done with Colorado, it's impressive because of the portal. It wouldn't have happened without the portal, I think, because traditional recruiting, it takes 3 or 4 years to get all those players in place, and you have to show success in order to entice the next year of players to come. The portal changes that quite a bit because you can go get better players, some seasoned players.
And you can pay them.
Yeah, and now that you're paying them, it makes it even easier. So I'm impressed. I'm impressed with the team that he put together, but I'm not altogether surprised that they had some good hype at the beginning, and now things are settling in to show where their talent level is. I think if he stays, they'll be a top 25 team in the next couple of years, but I don't think they'll break the top 10 with him as coach. That's my personal opinion.
And I think a lot of it depends on the level of player that he does get in there. And you're absolutely right. They've done a great job of calling attention to themselves. But just look at their schedule for the rest of the year. They have Oregon State next week in Boulder. Oregon State's nationally ranked and a very good team.
They're good.
They have the Arizona Wildcats coming in. Arizona is not a bad ball.
They're hot. No, they're hot.
They are
upset.
They won yesterday. They beat someone they shouldn't have beaten.
This is Arizona?
Arizona.
Yeah, beat Washington State,
they beat
I think
Washington
it was.
State, that's right.
Then both those games are home. Then they have Washington State in Pullman, Washington. Do you know where that is, guys? Pullman, Washington.
Is it way up there?
It's in the eastern part of the state where it is always cold, like it's snowing all the time. And then they close with Utah and Salt Lake City, and that's tough.
One of the things that has surprised me, Kevin, and you can comment about this a little bit, is for all the hype that Deion Sanders gets, Coach Prime and the sunglasses and his son's playing for him and all this other stuff, the things that he says after the games or during the week, I like. I think he says all the right things that you want to hear from a coach. We're good. We're not where we should be. He seems like even though he's up here, he's keeping those kids pretty level and pretty grounded in the program.
I would agree, and I would say there's a lot of kids who were basically booted out of there that wouldn't say nice things about him. But all the guys that he brought in, I think they do like him. They do play for him. They do think he protects them. And you see the way he treats them even on the field. He's hugging guys. He's whispering in their ears. He's supporting them. I think that probably plays well in the room, too. You know, after the Stanford loss, he kind of said, hey, guys, this is a defining moment, and we got this, but we're going to practice tomorrow. So I think you're right, Joe. I'm just curious, when you go to work, do you wear a sweatshirt and a hat with your name on it and your number?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Okay. And I make everybody at work call me Coach something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Kevin, I just want you to know that when I go to work, I wear a shirt and a hoodie with Joe's name and number on it, too.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. So it's not just me.
No. It's all of us.
Yeah.
He's our coach.
You know, we
does
talked
too.
about how far-reaching that recruiting is. We've got a kid from this area who is going out to Colorado, a freshman next year on next year's team. I said, Coach Prime? He said, I can't wait. I'm happy.
Yeah.
Big kid from Nevada, which is not really in our broadcast area, but fact of the matter remains, he is in our magazine area. And I said, Prime has that much? Oh, he said, I can't wait. Just absolutely think
And
this
that's all
going to
that
be
matters, right?
Right.
That's exactly what they're right. That's all that matters.
Here's what I'll say. For all of the hype and all of the presumed arrogance or true arrogance that Deion Sanders has had over his whole life, he's had really good coaches, too. Bobby Bowden was his coach at Florida State, and they were stellar with Bobby Bowden as their coach. Mm-hmm. And then he goes to the Cowboys, right? Was he at the
Atlanta?
He went to Atlanta first, and that was Dan Reeves was his coach, which you know.
I think maybe a little June Jones too.
Yeah, and
well,
then
not a bad coach.
Then he goes to the Cowboys, and who was their coach then? Was it still Jimmy Johnson?
Or was it Switzer?
I think it was Johnson. I believe that's who it was.
So he has seen coaching.
And he went to the Niners, don't forget either.
Oh, yeah. Then he played for the Niners.
And you guys are forgetting one other team.
The Royals.
The Cincinnati Reds.
Oh, yeah.
He played for the Royals, too, didn't he?
No, I don't think.
He played for the Yankees.
He played for the
Braves.
He played for the Braves.
Braves.
So
Bobby Cox.
Bobby Cox was his coach.
So there you
Braves
go.
and the Cincinnati Reds is who
So
he played for.
he has seen the blueprint for being a good coach, for being a great coach. And so we'll see if he's able to do it himself.
Well, maybe Sean Payton should be looking over his shoulder at what's going on.
Yeah,
over in Boulder, because maybe standing on the sidelines 3 years from now in Denver for the Broncos, Deion Sanders,
head coach Deion Sanders.
Could you imagine that? What do you think about that, Kevin? Did your stomach just flip? Your stomach just flipped,
Yeah.
didn't it?
and then who's got a quarterback? His kid, maybe?
Yeah, that's
possibly.
probably.
That's what's going on.
The kid is a good player. Now he's and Kevin's right. He's getting the hell beat out of him out there.
Yeah, he is.
Kevin,
He's
thanks.
tough, though, man. He's a stud.
Kevin, thanks for being with us. We appreciate it. As always, tell the family that we love them. Take care of everybody, and we'll talk to you again in the very near future. It's Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave. We'll talk baseball next, right here on your local live sports talk show.
You're listening to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, part of the Kansas City Chiefs radio network. Back to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, a proud member of the Kansas City Chiefs radio network.
We are brought to you by The Dive on Patent. We are Ned Talk, your local live sports talk show, 18 minutes away from the start of the Chiefs pregame show. Joe Westen, Ned Reynolds, Josh Roberts. Let us talk a little bit about some baseball. Ned, I think the commissioner had to answer some questions this week about something that's griping your bottom, and I know that's the playoff format that a lot of people are going, the Diamondbacks? The Diamondbacks?
Well, and I thought the commissioner did a pretty good job of dancing around the issue. Bob Nightingale, who is, I'm acquainted with him, and we have him on our show quite a bit. Very, very, very good baseball writer. Matter of fact, maybe the best in the country.
Yep.
He authored a piece 2 weeks ago that defended what they do now. Well, that totally 180 degrees goes against my personal philosophy. I say, why are they in there? All right, I can justify 2 wild card teams because you do have 3 divisions now. You have to have one for each league, and maybe throw another one in there, but it's just too much. And you can't have these teams. I don't care what the situation or what the argument is, you can't have some team just because they got hot at the end of the season not perform during the course of the season. Here you have the Dodgers and you have the Braves and the Orioles, all 100-game winners and not there. Now, it happens. But the fact of the matter remains, why do they have the opportunity for that to happen? You've got to figure out a playoff form that maybe includes the other teams, but gives these big winning teams some major advantage to make it worthwhile to play the regular season. Otherwise, it isn't, not to have them knocked out at all. I just don't like it the way it is.
I have the solution, and you're not going to like it. All these playoff series need to be best of 7.
Except that you drag the season out to Thanksgiving.
But then they have to win 4 games instead of 2 or 3.
Well, no, that would have some justifiable measure. It would, but you can't drag the season out that long unless you shorten the regular season schedule.
Which I don't. I think the season needs to be shortened a little bit, just a tiny bit. I would say, the opposite argument of your, and I understand your argument, because when you go into the playoffs and you look at all these great teams and then you're down to Texas and Arizona, I would say this. Texas and Arizona had to fight to get in.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference between they've been playing playoff baseball since August, if not sooner. And I think they're amped up to a different intensity level than a team like the Braves, who won the division by 12 games, or the Dodgers, who won the division easily. The Baltimore Orioles knew they were going to make the playoffs. There was a little battle at the end for who was going to win the division, but it wasn't something that it was like nail biting like it was for Arizona and Texas. There was a time both those teams late in the season were out of the playoff picture, and then they get in, and I think it's the intensity of baseball that you play through a longer period of time.
Well, not so much Texas, because they were in it the whole way. They had the best team.
But they were fighting.
The Astros for first place.
And
but the
Seattle.
fact of the matter remains that Texas had a good team. Arizona was 18 games back in their division race. 18 games back at the Dodgers. They knock off the Dodgers in the playoffs. And it was best of 5, I think it was, that they won that one.
5.
That, to me, does not resonate as being fair to the team playing 162 games and winning. Now, 154 games, it might have resonated a little bit differently, but I just don't understand the thinking behind that. You play the games to win, and you play the games to get a reward for doing it. And your reward's to get knocked out in a playoff game? No.
Gotta win.
The thing is, the reward in all sports for the way you finish in the regular season is your seeding for the postseason.
Now,
and
there's a different story right there, and I will go for that one. If you have to have that number of teams in there, you seed them 1 through 8 or whatever the division. However, you still have to give 1 and 2 a measure of understanding that they get a big break in this thing.
Yeah, like they get a first-round bye or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Somewhere along the line.
Yeah.
Well, they do now, as a matter of fact. They do get that bye. I'm not sure that is a good thing because they come out a little stale.
Baseball is so much different than any other sport in that sense, I feel, because I agree with Joe. The teams that are playing hot to get in, the ones that are struggling to get in and have to win and have to play that extra level of intensity typically are the ones that go farther in the postseason, and I think that's why.
In a way, yeah.
And so these teams that dominate throughout the regular season, they back off at the end to avoid injury and to avoid fatigue, and it works against them. The same thing happens in football in the sense that when the teams clinch the division 4 weeks before the end of the season, they typically don't play very well in that first playoff game.
Yeah.
And they get a first-round bye if they're that far ahead. But then that first playoff game comes around, and they are sluggish, and they're not back up to game speed. And I think that's what you're seeing in baseball. And because these teams that are fighting just for that last wild card spot or fighting for a division to win the division, but like this year when there were those – it was Seattle, Houston, and Texas, right, that were all fighting to be the division winner, but they were all good enough to win that division. So they all ended up – it was all about where they were going to end up seed-wise. Those guys were playing some intense baseball. And I like to see it. I like the underdog to win, unless it's Alabama. I want Alabama to win no matter what. And the Chiefs for that matter. But in sports, in other sports, I'm fine with the underdog getting that chance.
I was thinking about it compared to, I guess, it's not as bad as basketball or hockey. And I think sometimes you see the best teams come forward in basketball and hockey because there's not an intensity because so many teams make it. There's no intensity almost at all in either of those sports for the playoffs because half or more of the teams that are actually playing actually make the playoffs.
But you're okay, how many Major League Baseball teams are there now? 32? 30. And how many make the playoffs now?
A fourth of those.
14 make them right now. And
that's almost half.
It's literally, well, I can't say literally, nearly half of the teams.
Right. So the only difference is there are 32 teams in hockey, and 16 of them make the playoffs. It's only a 2-team difference. Same
but
with
still,
basketball.
there's a lack of intensity though for it because most of those teams you don't see. And I don't follow hockey as closely as I follow the NBA, but you don't see the NBA where a number 8 seed knocks off Golden State or the Lakers or Denver. You just don't see it because there's almost a lack of intensity in the sport itself because I think everybody feels like the season doesn't really mean that much.
I can see in hockey it's a little different. You do get some lower seeds that will knock off the top seeds. It happens every year typically, at least one. Maybe not an 8 beating a 1 all the time, but it does happen. But I agree with you. But what you're asking for baseball is going to make it the same way. If you shorten the season, you're doing the same because hockey and basketball both have 82-game seasons.
Well, we've barely talked about the World Series, which is the Diamondbacks and the Texas Rangers, and I think we're probably going to see a dandy First game was very good. Second game wasn't as great, but it got out of hand late.
Yeah.
You're going to see some good pitching. You're going to see some good baseball. You're going to see two teams that play the game the way that it should be played. Neither one team is a softball team. They've got some good pitching. They've got good bullpen, good defensive play. So should be a good World Series.
I think the good pitching, I'm glad you brought that out too, because that is certainly predominant in any kind of championship playoff, and you will see that. Arizona Diamondbacks have a tremendous pitching staff.
Yeah, they do.
With Kelly and with the Gallen kid who played down here at Springfield Cardinal. And then from there on in, they have two solid members of that rotation. It's a good. That's not to predict them to win, but the fact is that they can play the game.
When we come back, we'll give you our predictions for today's game with the Chiefs and the Broncos. It's Ned Talk. I'm 104.7 The Cave.
You're listening to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, part of the Kansas City Chiefs Radio Network. Back to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, a proud member of the Kansas City Chiefs Radio Network.
And we're just a few minutes away from the start of the Chiefs pregame show right here on 104.7 The Cave. Daniel Hughes, Mitch Holtis, Art Haynes, all the other individuals part of that show. Dan Israel. There's a ton of people on that show all the time. They do a very nice show. But it's time for our picks. By the way, Kevin texts me 24-14. He is picking the Chiefs to win the game today. He's also worried that you're upset with him.
I am upset?
Yeah, because you called him out on the nil thing. He called you out on the nil thing. He doesn't want to be banned from the show. That's what he said.
If I get called out for that mistake, there are many of us that are much worse than that, believe me.
All right, Ned, we'll start with you. Your pick for today's game?
I think the Chiefs win it, and I think the Chiefs win it relatively easily as opposed to the last game. I'm picking a score of 30-17, Kansas City over the Broncos. Be a little bit different for the Chiefs players since this is the first time they will have been exposed to any kind of really frigid conditions. It's been so blasted warm prior to that. The same, I guess, can be said for Denver, but they're a little bit more accustomed to it than the Chiefs are. But I don't think that slows them up at all. Kansas City to win at 30-17.
Let me ask you this as a side prediction. Do you predict this is maybe a game where Patrick Mahomes adds to the legend, the flu game like Michael Jordan, or will this be a game that we'll see him for a few series and then we'll see backup quarterback time?
Oh, no. I don't think you'll see a backup quarterback at all. They're paying this guy way too much money to, a little flu bug, get in there and play. And Mahomes is a player. He wants to get in there. He wants to do it. He would reject any kind of circumstance to bench him.
Well, we know one person won't be at the game today, Taylor Swift. That's already been confirmed. So how's that going to affect Travis Kelce?
That changes my prediction.
Picking the Broncos now.
Is it going to be snowing during the game,
No,
or has the snow already blown through?
It stopped.
Yeah. All right, so it's just going to be cold. Okay, if that's the case, I'm going to say this is going to be a lower scoring game than we think just because of the cold, and it's hard for people to hold on to the ball when it's frozen like that. So I'm thinking it's going to be like 21-6 Chiefs.
That's a good prediction. I like that.
But I will say this: they will take Mahomes out if it's like 28-0 at halftime or in the third quarter, because then they'll run roughshod of him with their defense.
Really quick, we were just about to run out of time, but I do want to mention, we mentioned McCall Hardeman having an impact last week. Omenihu had a big impact in his first game back with the Kansas City Chiefs. You can tell their defense is really, really good this year. I'm picking the Chiefs to win 17-3 in today's game. So that's our prediction. We all are picking the Chiefs. Well, thank you, Mr. Reynolds. I'll see you, bright and early next Sunday morning for another round of Ned Talk, because they'll be playing in London next week, folks. So have your fish and chips ready and your tea, because I guess we're going to be on the air at 7 a.m.
8:30 for the kickoff of the game. We are on at 7 a.m. here. Is that and the pregame show?
I guess so.
You sure it's not 6:30?
I don't know. I have to talk to Mike, the intern. He handles my schedule. We'll see you next week. It's Ned Talk. Get set for Chiefs and Broncos right here on 104.7 The Cave.